Anybody have a, there we go. I might ask Rashmi to
Yeah.
read some of
Link is
them
at
as
the top. In the
yeah,
chat, link is at the top. I'm gonna just put it again so you can see it. Oh, I'm sorry for that. It's a wrong.
No, I'll just read it out, Vijay. So the first, answer is no inhibitions to express oneself, a safe space to express, assurance of not being judged, not to be afraid of speaking about your opinion. Can be yourself and give honest feedback and not be afraid of repercussions. Psychological safety to me is being able to protect your mental state of mind, allowing yourself to assess any situation positively.
cool.
Yeah. So these are the comments, Karen.
Okay. So I get the theme kind of like it's the ability to sort of feel safe, show up. Um, Tim Clark would say it's a 5 word definition, which is easy for me because it's just 5 words. It's an environment of rewarded vulnerability. So when I think about that, I think, what does the word vulnerability mean? So now I have the same question for you all. Is like, what does that mean to you? When you think of vulnerability, what comes up for you? So put that in chat. And while you're doing that, I'll share with you a little bit about how it comes up for me. So I live in Colorado, and we have all these meadows. Um, and right now is this time when a lot of baby deers are being born and all of that. And I have this visual of like a baby deer sort of in this meadow, and around the perimeter of the meadow, there's like a mountain lion. And my first thought is, oh God, something bad's going to happen to that little deer. I can feel it in my gut, I can feel it in my heart, and I'm worried like fight, flight, or freeze, what's going to happen. And that I just feel this sense of true vulnerability for that. But it's a feeling, right? More than a thinking thing. It's more of a how do I feel in my our three brains. We have one between our ears, one in our heart, and one in our gut. Um, what do you see in Rashmi? What's coming up in the chat?
Yeah, so I have a couple of comments. Vulnerability to me is opening up yourself and showing your true self without fear of being reprimanded, rejected, or any guilt or shame. Another comment is being carefree, very open, prone to predictor attack. And then vulnerability is where I am comfortable to say I don't know.
Oh, I love that. So I'm gonna put a. We talked about Brene Brown, and her biggest research is really about vulnerability and shame. And her definition of it would be it's this core emotion that incorporates love, belonging, joy, and empathy. And when I think about that, um, like I don't know anybody who doesn't want those feelings,
Right.
you know. She also says it's the birthplace for innovation and creativity. So if you feel safe to be vulnerable and you're feeling sort of loved, belonged, and accepted, you can bring your best self to work. Imagine having that sense, at work in your environment and feeling like, okay, so I'm going to challenge things. I might be different. I might have a whole different idea or perspective about things, which starts to develop this sense for I'm going to be innovative and creative. Um, so it's a really powerful thing, this vulnerability thing. Um, so to marry these two together, the definition of vulnerability and to add it to Tim's definition is a psychologically safe environment is a place where vulnerability is rewarded, where you feel safe to be vulnerable. So with your paper, make this little flow chart. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And I want to talk more about vulnerability because it's this core of the definition. And what we're trying to do is define what is psychological safety, an environment of rewarded vulnerability, and why does it matter, and how do we do it? So vulnerability is this thing where think about, like, we are constantly in this mode of assessing the situation. Is this safe or not safe? No matter where you are, even if you're thinking, not even thinking about it consciously. Like, imagine you just go into a restaurant and you walk in and the waiter or waitress is very warm, very welcoming, and you're like, oh, I like it. I feel good here. The opposite can be the case. Imagine if, waiter, waitress, the hostess, you can feel negative energy. They're kind of at each other. They don't treat you very well. They're like, we're busy, sit here, wait, that kind of thing. You go into sort of, I would call that defensive sort of red zone, like, oh, this isn't going to be a great experience. Like, you can feel it. And that whole environment of like, when that starts to happen, imagine in a, in a meeting, right? Where even this meeting, imagine that you started to come in and let's just pretend that VJ or Rashmi was like getting on people's cases right away for being like, how come you don't have the link? Or why didn't you get here on time or whatever? And immediately people are like, whoa, what's going on here? Like, why are they on me? Um, and you shrink back into this space of sort of loss preservation, like personal risk management, right? And self-preservation. So that fight, flight, or freeze thing can happen. And if you're feeling engaged and you're feeling like safe, then you bring your best self. Then you're back into that love and belonging and joy and empathy and innovation and creativity. So this is important. This little flow chart is kind of one of these things that's like in the back of your mind thinking, am I safe or am I not safe? Um, and I told you the story a little bit about the meadow because this is a tiger as opposed to like a mountain lion, but nobody comes up with a good idea when they feel like they're being chased by a tiger, right? And it's like, we're not being chased by tigers, obviously. We know this old cliche and we've seen, we've talked about it before. But our brain doesn't really know the difference. When you're in a meeting and you feel triggered and you're in that unsafe zone, that executive process, which is the front part of your brain, has gone offline. So now you're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Um, when you're in that state, you're shrinking back and you're preoccupied with how can I just take care of myself right now? So when that happens, nothing good is happening after that, you know. Um, so I want to do a quick little experiment with you all, and I'm going to put this in. I'm going to come out of presentation mode here for a second, and um, just have you or Rashmi, you can put it in. I guess I can do it too. In chat, I'm going to put this link in chat.
Yeah, I pasted it.
And I love you guys. Oh, sorry, go for it. Jump into this and take these 5 little questions, right? Have you ever felt excluded in a social setting? Have you ever been afraid to ask a question? Have you ever remained silent when you knew the answer to a problem? Have you ever had someone steal credit for something you did? And have you ever been ignored in a discussion? So, can you still see my screen? Can you
Yes.
see the website? Okay. So take that little quiz if you would. Just quickly go through. Um, yeah, cool. So we've got everybody so far.
Yeah, all questions are true for me.
Right, of course they are, right?
Yeah.
So while I do this in the workshop, I'll just share with you. So I have people have their cameras on or cameras off or whatever, and they turn their camera off when they feel like they can relate to one. And I only have the first 5 questions because there's 12 questions. But typically, just to share with you, I get to about the second one and everybody's camera's off. So what is the point, right? It's like, oh my goodness, like every one of us can relate, if not to 1 or 2, all of them. That's the point, which I think is pretty powerful, right? We look at these things and we're like, wow, I felt excluded. I've been afraid to ask questions. Um, I've remained silent when I knew the answer for whatever reason. I was presenting something and someone else took credit for it. Um, and I've certainly felt ignored. So this is pretty powerful. So thank you for taking that. I'm going to go back and I'll go back into, can you see my screen again, the presentation?
Yes,
Yeah,
Karen.
thank you. So what's the point, right? It's like, okay, every one of us on this call can relate to feeling in some way, shape, or form not safe in that red zone. So what does that mean to business? So I've just highlighted, this comes from a study from yet another PhD. Her name is Christine Porath. She has a book called The Price of Incivility. And she's done a ton of research around when you feel unsafe, when you feel in an, kind of that red zone, what does that mean to business? And so I've just highlighted things that are above 50% here. Um, so 80% of the time you lost work time worrying about the incident. 63% lost time avoiding the person. I definitely can relate to that. It's like, ooh, I feel triggered, so I just don't want to be around them. 66% said that their performance declined, and 78% said that their commitment to the organization declined. Um, so that's pretty powerful for all of us as leaders and managers and parts of teams. It's like once you feel triggered, like this has a huge impact to business. So why does it matter? So our definition, if we're writing this down and you're keeping track, an environment of rewarded vulnerability. That's our definition. Second thing is, why does it matter? And we've all felt it. We just proved it through the little Menti exercise. Um, we've all felt it. And why does it matter? Because business really, really needs, there's these two sort of driving forces. I'd call it diversity, equity, and inclusiveness, so DE&I, or social injustice. So people, managers, leaders really need to have that ability to recognize love, joy, belonging, empathy, those things that Brene Brown brings up. And on the other side, from a market standpoint and a competitiveness standpoint, there isn't one business on this planet that doesn't want innovation and creativity. I mean, technology is sort of a given anymore. We're all in a global organization for the most part, a lot of people are. And it's like, it's the people that make it special. It's the people that are the secret sauce for these companies. So I would argue we've got DE&I, social and moral forces, and market and competitive forces, innovation and creativity. These are key things. And I would say from a leadership standpoint, this is by far in 2022 the most important competency to develop as a leader. More than any skill, by far. Now, having said that, it's just not easy. So how do we do it? So this is why it's important. So let's get into how do we do this. So take some notes. We're going to go through these 4 stages of Tim Clark's, because thanks for his framework. We add all these other researchers as well as a little bit of my thought process into this, but we use his model. So I'm not going to talk about inclusion, learner, contributor, and challenger just yet. I want to talk about the X and the Y axis. So we're on the same page about that. So if we go all the way to the right on the X axis, which is our permission axis in this diagram, we have this black area called exploitation. So what does that mean? So if we have very low respect and lots of permission, so I'm going to use Rashmi as an example. Let's pretend that I work for her and she gives me a lot of autonomy. She gives me a lot of work, but very low respect. She has no idea who I'm married to, whether we have kids, what's happening in my life, what are my hobbies. She doesn't care. Like, that's not her thing. The big thing is she loves it that I get work done. So she gives me a lot of work, a lot of autonomy, a lot of permission. But she doesn't care if I work weekends, after hours, on holidays. I'm burnt out. That's not her problem. So basically, she's exploiting me. That's an example. So if we have very low respect and lots of permission, all the way to the right, we end up in that black sort of exploitation box. Now, if we go the other direction, up the y-axis, up the respect axis, and I'll just keep using Rashmi. So let's pretend that she knows everything about me. She knows who I'm married to, what our kids are, what our dog is, what's happening in my life, what our hobbies are, all of that. We have a great personal relationship, but she gives me very little autonomy, um, very small opportunities to grow and to experiment with new things. Um, so almost micromanaging, kind of like the helicopter parent, if you will. So I would call this, or Tim would call this, paternalism. So if you're in that box, you're sort of like not a lot of opportunity, lots of like personal respect, but not a lot of potential to grow. So we want to stay out of those extremes. So that's the why that we go up the middle of this kind of XY axis. So, having said that, I'll keep us going here. Let's dig into how do we do this? So, we've got a definition, we know why it's important. Now, let's talk about, well, so how do I do that? And in the workshop, we do a lot of this. We dig into it, but today we don't have an opportunity to go all that deep because of our time constraints. But hopefully, there's one or two things you'll get out of it. So I'm going to ask for some help. And Rashmi, would you be willing to read the definition of inclusion safety for us?
Sure. Inclusion safety is the basic human need to be included, accepted, and belong. You are accepted for who you are, including your unique attributes and defining characteristics. We all have felt excluded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so thank you. Um, so this is the definition of inclusion safety at the beginning. And based on our little experiment, every one of us was like, yes, I have felt excluded. So feeling excluded is a difficult thing because with physical pain, you can see if I broke my leg, I might have a cast, or I can take, Advil or ice or whatever. I can elevate, I can manage the pain, and it's obvious. If I have social rejection, if I feel excluded, not valued, that's inside and that's difficult. And a lot of times it comes out in a lot of different ways, fight, flight, freeze. Those are the things, right? And if it's fight, if I'm in a meeting and I feel like triggered, fight could be I get defensive and push back. Um, Flight could be is I can't wait to get out of this meeting and have the meeting in the hall with my friend about the meeting and talk about it. Freeze could be is fine, I'm just not going to say anything. I'll just shut down, right? So I'm triggered in that meeting and it's an internal thing. So this is hard because inclusion in this model means you should be included because you're a human on this planet. If you're not hurting somebody else, you matter, regardless of all the things that people exclude people for. So here's an example. Why do we exclude people? We do that because we have these bias and stereotypes. And David Rock would say, if you have a brain, you have a bias, right? So we grew up someplace, you grew up as a certain gender. The things I have listed here, different social status, different physical, tall, short, fat, skinny, ethnic backgrounds, male, female, political. In the United States, I can tell you the Democrat and the Republican parties are very polarized. There's a lot of judgment and bias going on about that. Religion, that's pretty obvious. Education, economic age, old people have sage wisdom and young people are more technical savvy. Like those are biased. They may or may not be true. Um, Occupation, I'm the janitor, I'm the CEO. Do we have a mental model of those two things? And where you are in the world, right? So these are all things that get in the way of us including people. And sometimes we do them unconsciously. So people should be included because they're human and they matter. And as long as you're not hurting somebody else at this stage in our psychological safety, it's owed to you. You shouldn't have to earn the opportunity to be included. So how do we do this? How do we create it? So first thing we'd say is try to identify and stop perpetuating these bias and these stereotypes. Because if you have a brain, you do have a bias. And so let me give you a quick example. So one of my challenges, one of the bias I have is I don't like guns. And so if I see somebody that has a big gun rack in their car or is very public about guns are a right and I should be able to carry a gun and all of that, I have to watch myself. And so the counsel here would be is try to interrupt that pattern. I may feel it in my gut or in my heart or even in my brain, but when I do, it's like that's my bias. So can I get curious? Is there an opportunity for me to seek to understand, ask some questions versus judge and react? So if I'm in a work environment and I know somebody is very into guns, would I treat them differently? Would I exclude them from, the Friday beer or the coffee talk or whatever? And it's like that is what we're talking about. Like that is not okay. The idea is to be able to say, I don't have to agree, but it means I want to try to better understand versus jump to judgment. So inclusiveness is key as far as recognizing why do we have these bias. So that's step one. So I'll keep us moving here. So I'm at learner stage now. So VJ, would you be willing to read the definition of this one for me?
Yes, learner safety satisfies the basic human need to learn and grow. You feel safe in the learning process, asking questions, giving and receiving feedback, experimenting, and even making mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So this is natural. Once you feel included, right? We just went through like, okay, now I'm part of the group as a person. I feel accepted for who I am and how I show up. The natural inclination of humans is to want to grow, is to want to learn. I mean, if you think about even Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like once we have the basic, food, clothing, and shelter at the bottom of the pyramid, we naturally want to move up. So that's normal in psychological safety too. But this is hard because as adults, we put all these bias and all these things and all these pressures on ourselves to be perfect, to be right, to not feel awkward. Um, so I put in here, have you ever had a teacher or somebody that had more confidence in you than you had in yourself? And I know I have, right? I'm trying to play guitar, learn how to play guitar. And I feel awkward as an adult because I wish that I was great immediately. But my teacher's great in that he's really all about progress. And he doesn't care if I get it wrong or I play it silly. Um, he's not, he separates this concept of mistakes, from and failure. And he's like, it's all about the learning, which is key. Because I put in here, when you feel triggered in a learning state, especially as adults, our brain needs to have the front part, this executive process online. And if we're in that red zone, back to our flow chart, right? The blue zone, red zone kind of thing, um, our ability to learn is impaired. So we're in that self-preservation, fight, flight, freeze mode, right? So we've got to feel safe. We've got to feel like, okay, I'm in a good space. I'm vulnerable, I'm awkward, and that's okay. So first thing, how do we create this? Separate fear and failure from mistakes. So I don't know if you know who, I'm sure you do, Simon Sinek. He does a lot of videos and a lot of speaking, and he has one that he talks about using the word falling instead of failing. And he's like, when you fall, you get back up. He's like, I didn't fail, I just fell, and it's like there's an opportunity for me to continue to get back up and keep going, keep learning, and keep progressing. Sort of this concept of the growth mindset, if you will. Or Adam Grant would say, think like a scientist, which is like, it's a hypothesis that we prove or disprove and collect more data and keep going. But it's hard because people need encouragement. And so let me give you another example. I'll use VJ. I'll pretend that I work for VJ now too. And let's say we're in a meeting and I want to learn something. And I may say to him, hey, VJ, can I take that action item and can I work on that? And would you help me? And if he says, you know what, Karen, I don't know how to do that either, but we can learn together. Or he may say, I don't know how to do that, but I know Rashmi does. So maybe the two of you, I can pair you up and you guys can work together on that and learn that. So can you imagine, like, he's my boss and he says that and he models the way for everybody in that meeting to feel safe when he says, you know what, I don't know either, and that's okay. And so what a cool thing to be open and to be vulnerable and supportive. So that's one way we can do it. The last point on here, just as a thought for learning, is to help the learner start to grow on their own. So on a coaching spectrum, you have this tell and you have ask. So tell would be more directive, more helpful. Like at the beginning, let's pretend that VJ is saying, I'll give you a lot more direction on what to do. But over time, he may say, now I want to just ask you some questions. What do you think, Karen? How might you try that? Why would you go about it this way or that way? Which what he's doing is he's transferring critical thinking to me to develop my growth and my learning in the process. So those are some opportunities for us to kind of experiment as we're helping people learn. So let's go to the next one. Does anybody else feel? Sherelle, are you there? I can see you. Would you be willing to read this for me?
Sure. Hi, contributor safety. Contributor safety satisfies the basic human need to make a difference. You feel safe to use your skills and abilities to offer a meaningful contribution.
Awesome, thank you. So this is pretty natural, right? It's like, I feel included as a human. I'm starting to learn. I'm getting some support along the way. And now I want to plus one things. So I am moving up into this spectrum of like, I want to change things and I've got this sort of skill and will to do this. So I say that this is different in that it's earned versus owed. So back to inclusion safety, where it's like, you don't have to earn being included. As long as you're a human and you're not hurting somebody, you matter. At the contributor level, you've got the skill, you've learned it, and now you're earning this right to contribute, to plus one things, to add things along the way. I put in here, back to our model and our X and Y axis. If a lot of you do probably Scrum and product ownership and agile transformations, and one thing that comes up quite a bit is when we're changing an organization and we're moving away from traditional sort of manager and hierarchy and moving towards product ownership, that can be very triggering to managers. It's like, what is my job? Where do I fit in now? So I bring this up is because people can start to like pull back on people's ability to have that autonomy and to grow and to learn. So they get into that paternalism state where it's like, I really respect you as the person and I really like you, but I'm uncomfortable giving you lots of opportunities because I don't really get it and I'm uncomfortable. So paternalism, again, is that you have this high respect but low permission. And that relates to things that can get in the way for contributor safety as people learn and grow and they want to do things on their own and they want to plus one things. So that's kind of one of those impediments. So how do we do it? First thing I want to say is explain the big picture. Like what for this person as they're learning this new thing, right? It's like, what's important and how does it add value to a group or to a team or to an organization? Then assign the what. So now they're getting clear about, do you have the task or the project or the outcome? Like what level in this whole project are you now in the contributor space? So it's clear, and you have the skill and the will, right? So you want to plus one things and you have the skill that you've learned. And then finally, delegate, let it go. Allow the individual to experiment and come up with ways to solve the problem. Now, this doesn't mean abandon the person. So on our model from inclusion to learning to contributing, you can go from contributing back to learning because sometimes people get stuck and that's okay. We don't want people to feel awkward and uncomfortable to ask for help. So at the contributor stage, imagine you sort of have this cycle, right? Where you're kind of going between learning and contributing and learning and contributing. Because once we delegate, we don't want to abandon. A support is key for the people when they need help, to be able to feel safe to say, hey, I'm stuck and I might need some help. Okay, so now we're at the fourth stage.
Karen, we have a comment from
Yes.
Margaret. She says there can also be a situation where they give you all of the responsibility, but no rights, which is a recipe for failure.
Yeah, so that's kind of back to that paternalism thing, right? No autonomy, no real ability to do it. So give me the work, but not the tools and things I need, if I'm understanding. Is that correct? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I guess I'll ask who else. Let's see. Let's have one more person read this. So,
Margaret,
Harisha,
Margaret,
go ahead. VJ, what were you saying?
Margaret can read it. She is active.
Okay, great.
You there,
Margaret.
Margaret? Yeah, Margaret.
Stage 4, challenger safety. Challenger safety satisfies the basic human need to make things better. You feel safe to speak up and challenge, and status quo when you think there is a need or opportunity to improve.
Awesome. Thank you. So this is natural, right? So now we're at the highest level. So we've been included, we're learning, we're contributing. Now we're feeling like I want to be able to challenge the status quo. Maybe push back on Rashmi, my boss, and say, hey, I know we've been doing this for the last 20 years, but I see it differently. So at this stage, this is really where there's a high tolerance for candor, creative tension, diverse thinking, constructive dissent. This is where, if you follow Kim Scott, she would say radical candor is kind of her thing. So this is the most vulnerable. Back to our definition of an environment of rewarded vulnerability, we're at the top of it. So when you speak up, when you challenge things like the status quo, two things can happen, right? In my scenario, if Rashmi's my boss and I challenge her and she says, you know what, Karen, you always bring up, issues and we'll just put that on the parking lot and I don't want to talk about it. Like I can tell you that immediately I go from high vulnerability to exclusion, all the way back below inclusion. As opposed to if she says, I love it, thank you for bringing that up. How can we approach that? How might we address that? Let's dig into that, which puts me in the blue zone and makes me feel like, awesome. I'm glad I was able to bring that up. So, because if people are threatened, they go right back to the red zone. It's tough, right? So let's talk about how do you do challenger safety? So on this right-hand side of this chart here, I have two things. I have increased intellectual friction and decreased social friction. So what do we mean by that? So increasing intellectual friction is really around, in our scenario, is the thing we're trying to address. The thing I want to challenge from a status quo. It's a process, it's a product, it's a thing, right? It's not a person. So here's the hard part, right? We want to focus on that in the middle of the table and stay away from the personal side of it, which is we're all human and we're full of emotions and that's what makes us great. But it's hard not to be attached sometimes to something. If you wrote a program and it existed for 20 years and it's been great and you're proud of it, it's hard when people say, hey, let's do it different. So you've got to have that ability to look at your own humility and control your ego and capacity to really handle when people say, hey, let's look at that. But we want to focus on the thing, not the person. So language is key too. If I said to Rashmi, your process is stupid, can you imagine how she would feel? First of all, I'm addressing like your process, and using words like stupid is not cool. Instead, I could say, the process is hard for me and I have some other ideas. Can we talk about it? It's a total different approach, you know, it's much more, and respect for it's worked great. I just see it differently. Can we talk about it? So that's key. So one way to do that, so that's hard individually to do it on your own. But one thing you can do at the challenger level is to actually create a process where being able to challenge the status quo is part of it. So it's not like one person's responsibility to say, hey, I don't like this, or I don't see it that way, or what have you, which creates more of a culture within a team. So I'd say here, assign loyal opposition, a devil's advocate, or I even have a little model in here. Some of you may be familiar. V2MOM, acronym for Vision, Values, Methods, Obstacles, and Measures. It comes from Salesforce.com. Mark Brenoff is the CEO that's created that. But the point I bring up here, and you probably know, you can create working agreements, you could do a lot of things that formally assign the ability to say, we're gonna go and have some obstacles. We're gonna call it out. We're gonna look at this process and we're gonna say, what do people see as part of the issue, or why would this not work, or why has it been working, and what might we do different, so that it doesn't feel like it's one person's responsibility or one person is always the person bringing it. So it puts people hopefully more in that blue zone, back to our little flow chart, as opposed to the red zone. So I'm going to stop there and summarize basically what we did. So we talked about psychological safety as an environment of rewarded vulnerability. It matters because it's this new leadership competency, super important for feeling love, belong, joy, and empathy, as well as innovation and creativity. So from a market standpoint and from an inclusive standpoint, those are the two big reasons. And how do we create it? For starters, inclusiveness should be everybody should be included if they're a human. We need to watch our own sort of bias and stereotypes so that we can be more inclusive. And then once we move into learning, we need support. We need to admit mistakes, transfer that sort of critical thinking from ask, you know, from tell to ask. And then as we get into the contributing thing, it's like you earn it because you have the skill and the will, and that works together, and it's kind of this reciprocal growth agreement. And then finally, when we end up at the status, challenging the status quo, we want to maximize intellectual friction and minimize the social friction, and then maybe just assign the process of bringing up obstacles and bringing up things that you see differently as a part of a team agreement, or part of as you're planning a project, so that it feels safe. So I'm going to stop there. The rest of my presentation is just really about, if you wanted to dig in to really go through this workshop with me, what does it look like? It's interactive, it's a practice. We really talk about your own values and your own assumptions and bias. You start with kind of like, what's your current state of psychological safety? And then we can do a reflection at the end of, where are you now? So there's 6 modules in the workshop. We do an introduction, we dig into brain impacts on inclusion and bias, and there's always homework in between each session. And then we have learner safety, which we get into what impedes learning and how do you overcome that. Contributor safety, how do you do coaching and accountability within that process? And then challenger safety, which is really digs into why do we have all these impediments to challenging the status quo. And then we have a summary and a reflection at the end, and we can even do assessments of teams at the end. So that's the workshop. We do have one coming up here in July, and so you can kind of see the dates where it's 90-minute sessions once a week, which gives people the ability to do the homework in between and reflect on what are they learning and what are they experimenting with, and each of the stages, and bring it back into the workshop and be able to share and express and talk about what's working and what are the challenges, and we unpack that together. So that's the cost of the workshop for now. If you want to know more about it, you can contact me or Rashmi too. She's helping me with this one. And I'll stop here, and I'll open it up for questions. But I think I love this little saying: the single most important factor in creating psychological safety is the behavior that we model as the leaders. So we're either modeling that behavior and leading the way, or getting in the way. So I'm done. Thank you for all of your listening and for the contributions along the way. Any thoughts or questions? I think we just have a
Yes.
7 to
Please,
10 minutes.
if you have the questions, please put it in chat so that we can organize well.
I just felt like it got over so quickly, Karen. It's a very interesting topic, and I could just go on and on listening.
Yeah. So Margaret, you have a question? Yeah.
No, I was trying to clap hands. I don't know. Somehow your
Okay.
reactions don't work. When we are in the
Yes.
office, when I click on the clap, the whole screen goes clapping.
No problem. Pramod, do you have a question? I could see that your hand was raised.
I was giving thumbs up. It
Oh,
was
okay. That's
great,
good.
great and a quick presentation. And I was trying to relate to my workspace and how well we are doing on the psychological safety.
Yeah.
That's it. No question from my side.
Okay. Yeah, Aniket, yeah, I can see Aniket.
Sid and
Yeah.
Aniket asking questions.
Yeah, just put it in chat. Yeah, your question, please.
So while they're typing the question, Karen, we have some comments. That was truly awesome, Dr. Karen. Just
Yeah.
want to say thank you and great presentation with a thumbs up.
Thank you.
Yeah. So one question I have, I see Sid. You have a question?
Well, I have a couple. Is Karen still around?
Yes.
Yes, she's there.
Okay. So
Stop sharing, actually.
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about two situations, two examples. These two examples are real life situations. I would like to know how Karen would have responded to these situations. First one goes back almost more than a decade ago, almost 12, 13 years ago. Of course, times have changed. I do a lot of stuff with UK Gov, the UK government. So I'm in the agile space. Just a quick, not more than 10 seconds. I've been in the agile space for only the last 16 years of my life. So it's not a big deal. But anyways, I was introducing agile into a government organization. So I'd been called in to introduce agile. So I'm starting from scratch. And day one, the first day, the senior chap comes up to me. He's the head of PMO. And he comes up to me and he says, Sid, I said, yeah, I've been here for the last 23 years of my life. Everything running successfully, everything going on fine. Why do I need to learn this newfangled thing called agile? Yeah. Everything is working fine. It's all going, my career is great. There's nothing, no problems. And now I come to the other part of it. And I have to learn this from, quote unquote, a bloody Indian.
Ooh. Okay.
All right. Now, I would like to know how would you respond to that? Of course, like I said, the times have changed, but the times have changed. And therefore, people will speak differently. It doesn't mean they've forgotten all that. Because now people understand that it's illegal to use those kind of phrases and use that kind of language. You can no longer say a bloody Indian. I can put you in jail for doing that. But those days were different. Like I said, the times have changed, but it doesn't mean that the thinking has changed. There are people who still feel that way.
Mhm.
How would you respond to a person who says something like that?
So how did you respond? I have
Oh,
an
I kept
opinion.
my cool. I am an Indian. No escaping that.
I think you're beautiful. I love you.
So I kept my cool and I said, I put it another way and I said, I'm not here to discredit your 23 years of service. I'm not here to say what you're doing is all useless and throw it out of the window. My job here is to see how can we enhance that? How can we make, whatever you're doing, can we make it more efficient? Can we make it more, better? Can we save some money while doing it? And da-di-da-di-da. And well, that kind of cooled down the situation. But I'm interested to know, how would you have responded if somebody said something like that to you?
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. I think the hard part is to not be triggered by the comment, the bloody Indian comment. And I think that would be the first step, is to be able to be authentic about, hey, that's hurtful. I mean, it takes courage and vulnerability to be the person on the other side that says, um, when you talk to me like that, that puts me in a place of fight, flight, or freeze. And you're here to do what's best for the company too. And it doesn't mean you can't learn and can't grow, but it does start with inclusiveness. So before getting into even the dialogue about agile and transformations and change, if we follow our model, I would say the first thing is to be able to say to him, hey, that's hurtful to me. And let them know authentically, like, that's not okay. Because we have to have boundaries with people. It doesn't mean you have to be angry. Back to the point that I had with the gun thing, I don't have to like guns, but I don't want to put the person that owns a gun in a box to say he or she is bad just because I have a bias. So that particular person has a bias, right? He or she learned that from someplace. So love, empathy, joy, belonging, I would turn it around and I would put the ownership truly on you to say, first of all, that's hurtful. And second of all, let's talk about it. Like how do we lean in? Um, so I don't think that's easy. I think that's really that takes a very mature, um, psychologically sort of advanced person. And Sid, you probably have that in you, just based
Thank
on
you.
what I know. um, but once you get through that, I mean, there's this connection and this relationship. And I won't go too far into this, but like hostage negotiators do this, right? Where you've got a group of people that are locked up in a building and you've got somebody with a gun. And when they negotiate with a hostage person, the first thing they say is listen and connect. You don't have to agree. But when people truly feel heard, it's essential, it's equivalent to love. So imagine Sid saying to this person, so you called me a bloody Indian, which is hard, but let's talk about it. Connection, love, belonging, joy, empathy. The minute that person goes, shit, Sid's pretty cool. And regardless of my bias and where I'm coming from, maybe I can develop an allyship. Maybe we can start to develop a connection. Um, so that's my opinion. I don't think it's the only way, but that
No,
might be
I'm
the
sure that's very useful. I'll give you a second example, a second situation, and then I'll keep shut. I'll let other people ask questions. It's again another UK government department. Again, I was called in to introduce Agile. Again, it's day one. I spent the whole morning from 9 o'clock till about almost 1 o'clock explaining kind of introducing Agile. What's Agile all about? The Agile ways of working, the Agile philosophy, And now we have set up a meeting for 2 o'clock after lunch. And I've got these group of about 13, 14 people in a room where I'm going to, do a second presentation about, how it works, how backlogs happen and how the project and so on. And another is another senior chap who says, "Excuse me, Sid, can we step out for a moment?" I said, "Yeah." So I step out with him. He says, "Sid, do you know I'm grade 10? I said, "Okay." No, it's not okay. I am grade 10. You got me in a room. You called me into a meeting with grade 4 people. I don't even talk to grade 4 guys.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll tell you how I responded. And I said to him, "Okay, I understand. I get it. I completely get it. I completely understand. But would you not like to?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, hang on, you're grade 10. But once upon a time, you were grade 4 yourself, weren't you? You didn't become grade 10 yesterday morning. You started as, grade 3 or grade 4 or whatever. And over the years, you have come to grade 10. But you weren't born grade 10. It's what in my mind. Of course, I didn't say all this to him. But what I said to him, I completely get it. I understand. I completely get what you're saying. But do you not think that you would like to share your far superior knowledge with the junior guys? Would that not be useful? Would that not be helpful? Okay. And he came back. But
Nice.
I would like to know from you, how would you have, been if you been in such a mess? This guy thinks he's Hercules, or he's a demigod
Mhm.
just because he's grade 10.
Yeah. I guess I don't think I need to answer that, because I think you were beautiful. I think you're amazing. I think exactly what you did is to be able to again meet people where they are, and recognize that position power for this person was super important to their identity, and being situational enough to go, hey, you could be a mentor. You can show us, you can help model the way, which gets him or her in your camp of, again, I love this word, allyship, right? Where they're part of the solution and you've brought them in as part of the way. I think that's pretty powerful stuff, Sid.
It was just, I'm not joking. I had no time to think about it. When he said this, I'm grade 10 and da. Believe me, for a few moments, I was completely flummoxed. I didn't know what to say. I mean, what do you say to me? Come on, you're an educated guy.
Yeah.
What do you say to such a, of course, then, like I said, like, it just came out. And I said, yes, I understand. I get it. And would you like to share your far superior knowledge? And he got it back.
Yeah, others, if you have a question, please write in chat.
Yeah, I shall shut up now. Let other people ask.
Okay, thank you for
Yeah,
that.
while others are writing the question, your situation reminded me of something I read in Adam Grant's book. He says, when you have a scientist mindset, or when you are seeking to understand the other person's perspective, it's like, you don't, we usually use this word agree to disagree, right? You use that in a different context. When you are operating with an ego, you will agree to disagree and close the conversation. But if you are operating with a scientist mindset, you'll agree to disagree and initiate a conversation to know more with curiosity. So thanks for sharing that, Sid.
That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think HP had a question.
I was just typing it. Maybe I can just speak about it here.
Go ahead.
So wonderful session. First of all, Dr. Karen, it's a privilege to be in such enlightening sessions. So my question is going to be short one. You know, we often use this personality assessment tools. I will just bring an example like MBTI, which tells you about your personality and the personality of the people who work with you. Is there a way you relate psychological safety, or you have some level of awareness while going through these various stages to see from the prism of this personality indicators, like for example, how to handle introverts, how to not I would say handle, but how to manage extroverts, or judging, sensing, those kind of personality.
I'm not sure. I'm following. Might need some help. Say it again, HP.
Okay. Let's say you run this personality assessment, MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicators, right? Then I know that I have these personality traits in my team members. They are introverts, something like that. Then, in the context of psychological safety, does it make sense to relate? Because then it's like knowing, we talk about like humility, we talk about ego, we talk about vulnerability. An awareness about these traits help us connect and relate to situations where psychological safety is required. Imagine if someone doesn't know about anything about these at all, right?
Yeah, I think awareness is key. I think Karen mentioned that early on, saying that if you're aware is only when you get a choice to either operate this way or that way towards,
Exactly.
like she mentioned, flight, freeze, fight, right? So if you're aware and you know how the situation is going to turn out to be, you're going to take one of those responses. But his question, Karen, is if you are aware of your own personality traits, is there a way you can relate psychological safety to different personalities and how they would react and become aware of, that response,
Exactly.
and then change the way you want to respond to?
Ooh, that's a good one. Back to the definition of vulnerability in my mind is if you're aware, let's say there's an assessment in this workshop that we have where you go through and you sort of do this introspective work on where am I biased? Where are my stereotypes? And it's not easy because a lot of it is unconscious, but and it could be personality traits and so forth. But if you work on the awareness, to Rashmi's point, and then actually, I think this concept of asking for feedback and recognizing how you show up. It again, if I have a bias, I use the gun thing, but let's just pretend, and I work in the same group with Rashmi, and I ask for specific feedback because, make it up, VJ likes guns, and if I ask her, hey, can you help? Can you watch my behavior? Like if this is focused feedback as opposed to hey, how do you think my leadership is? Like that's too broad. Like I want to ask for feedback from somebody that I know will be honest and authentic and say, how do you think I'm including VJ or not? Because I know that I have my own personal bias, my own traits, my own personal issues around this gun thing. So this is just an idea, but that's one way we can become more aware and have a partnership and accountability with somebody else outside of ourselves, because it's hard. Like I would say it's really hard to know when we're doing it ourselves, especially when we're in the middle of it. But if we ask for help, and it's a little vulnerable to say, hey Rashmi, can you watch me interact with VJ, and if I act weird or I don't include him, can you tell me that? Because I want to work on that because it's
Yeah.
something that I'm struggling with. I don't, that might be useful.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's also from my personal experience because, as you progress, advance, apart from awareness, I would also say that if you have a higher sense of consciousness, right, because you're constantly watching yourself also.
Yeah.
You assess every situation. You come out from a meeting and say, "Oh, this was something that triggered. This was something that triggered. How can I be better next time?" So again, like a
Yeah,
learning mindset, like constantly from the
right. I mean,
experiences.
back to the thing we talked about even at the beginning is writing things down. So this reflection process to help us learn is super important. Like, let's pretend we had a meeting and I asked Rajmi for feedback around how I'm interacting with VJ and she gave it to me. If I have my own reflection and I write, like, here's what she said, here's how I felt, here's what I think, we're learning. Like, the ability to go back and reflect is super important, I think, as far as building our own awareness.
Yeah.
Because it's so easy as humans to like have the experience and not reflect and not really gain that awareness and just go forward, right? And it's like, so we got to interrupt that pattern sometimes and give our brain a second to go, ooh, what did happen there? How am I feeling? What, how did I show up? Was I great? Or was I not great? And if I was great, why? And if I wasn't, then what happened? And it's like, that's a true opportunity to get some nuggets about our own awareness and our own bias.
Wonderful. Thank you, Dr. Karen. Really appreciate your insights.
So one more question, Karen, about this workshop and the people that joins a Saturday session. Mostly all of us are either agile coaches, leaders in the organization, scrum masters, or people who are influencers. So in this workshop, because I get a lot of knowledge on internet, how this workshop is going to enable me or help me better than that knowledge that I can get from YouTube.
Well, I'm very biased about our ability to collaborate and be together. And after each, like back to the modules, there's 6 modules, right? And there's exercises, and there's pre-work and post-work, and there's reflection, and there's learning from each other. And I will bring in, again, I've been through Brene Brown stuff, I've been through David Rock's stuff, I've been through Amy Edmondson's stuff, and I've been through Tim's stuff. So there's nothing in this workshop. Even Peter Bregman, which you may or may not know, but he's the #1 executive coach in the United States, and I've been through an intensive workshop with him. And so part of what we would do in this workshop is unpack that stuff and really use some of those tools from those thought leaders that I've had some firsthand experience to bring back and to be able to share. So I think it's different when you're together and you've got that opportunity to collaborate and to practice and to come back each week and reflect and have a group that's all doing that together, as opposed to if I was trying to learn guitar on my own, I can watch videos all day long, but I don't really know if I'm playing the right notes or if I'm playing it actually in the right time. I may think I am, but without you as my teacher to say, yeah, Karen, so you're playing in 3/4 instead of 4/4, I might not even know that. And I think that's the difference in this workshop, is that we get to lean in and struggle. And I've had people cry in these workshops and laugh. And that's all part of feeling included and valued as a person. So I think it's pretty powerful.
Wow, interesting. People cry, people laugh. That's really amazing. I mean, I never joined such a session, especially the agile session. These are all about some exercises and knowledge. But definitely I'm interested. I'm going to join. So people who want to join this particular session, I'm also giving you the link here and you can get in touch with us, whatever questions you have, and then we would answer that. Because I feel in today's world, leaders are so busy, especially in India, I am saying, Karen, so busy in day-to-day work that they really forget the biggest asset, people. And they feel sometimes that giving them the KRA, we call it KRA, key responsibility areas. And then we tell them, yes, you are supposed to do this. You have to challenge me. That's one sentence in there. You have to challenge status quo. You have to bring in innovativeness and something. That's what I'm telling you at the start of the year. And that's it. So I think that drives, the KRA should drive the courage in people, KRA should drive results in people, and so many things. So definitely that's going to help.
Yeah.
Aniket also has a question here. Psychological safety. Do you think psychological safety is unconscious thing, especially in the context of team? If yes, how should we help the team to make it more conscious thing?
Yeah. So I think it's a very conscious thing. I mean, but it's little steps, it's micro steps along the way. And I think, again, back to the workshop or whatever, there are things that you can practice every day, and you can bring them up in team agreements, you can bring them up in working agreements, so you can make it very visible to people that we are going to include people, we are going to help people learn, we are going to expect people to contribute, and we are going to create a space where challenging the status quo, there's this concept of what I'd call air cover, and it's like we're going to define what that looks like, so that when I do challenge the status quo, and if I'm shut down by my boss, or I do it in a way that's disrespectful, that we're able to say that's not what we agreed to. So I think it makes it very conscious for teams to say, we're going to do this. And it's like, I don't know if you've heard of Project Aristotle, but it was done with Google. And it was all about what is the most important thing for teams to be effective. And they went through everything from, stretch goals to job descriptions to, focus and vision and all of these things. And the number one thing was psychological safety. And so you might have to unpack that and say, well, what is that for our team? That means including people, checking our bias, helping people learn, contributing, and challenging the status quo. So you got to call it out. Otherwise, we as humans will not think about it, and it's like diet and exercise. I mean, psychological safety is not something that you go to a class once and you're going to check the box and you're like, I got this. Like, I can't run 26 miles today and expect to walk tomorrow. I'm going to have to practice every day if I'm going to run a marathon. And if I want to lose weight or I want to be healthy, I can't eat healthy one day and then think, I got this, right? It's like that. This is exactly like that. I could go on forever, you guys. I believe it to my heart. I was in corporate America, or corporate, for 35 years, and I reflect back on my history, and I was an engineer, and then I left as a president of a company, and it's like, this is the leadership competency. This is the secret sauce. This is the stuff that will make a difference. At least that's what I believe. Yeah.
So Harsha, Manu, Rupesh, you haven't spoken. Salim, if you have any questions, please put it in chat and speak out. If not, then I'm gonna hand it over this session to Rashmi to say thanks. And yeah, so if you have questions, please say out. Even if you want to say thanks to Karen, that's good.
Absolutely, Vijay, and thank you so much, Karen, for this wonderful session. Psychological safety has always been an issue for me. Like I left my parents' place and my native place at the age of 17, and have always been in another city for education and work, and then another country for work again. So there is always the sense of not being included has always been there with me. And yeah, I have always been like a fighter in order to fight against all the odds and to pave way for me. But again, I wish that the psychological safety becomes more and more a norm going forward in the world, I would say, not only in the companies.
Yes,
and the people like me, who leave their places and go out and step out, feel more included going forward. Thank you so much, Karen. I hope I could attend your workshop as well. And yeah, looking forward to it. Thank you.
We have a few more comments on the chat. Margaret says, thank you, Karen. You can have your breakfast now. Sorry, delayed you for 20 minutes. And Salim says, thanks a lot, Karen, for this wonderful session. Glad I attended this. Yeah, thank you so much, Karen. It was really a privilege having you here and having this conversation with you. We didn't even realize how time flew. So I am super happy that you accepted this opportunity at such a short notice and helped us learn so much about psychological safety in such a little time. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you.
Guys, there's a question that please put a link for registering for the session. Yes, I'm putting it in the chat. Yeah, and you can come to AgileWaters website and you'll actually find it there. And Margaret, we can also reach you. So guys, every Saturday, same time, same location, as you know. Please join us. Yeah, and thank you so much once again, Karen. And thank you so much, Rashmi, for making this happen. This is really going to be really wonderful. And we are going to join your session, Karen. Yeah, and please, if you have friends, your leaders in your company, if you feel that they need this particular session, definitely everyone's going to need it. So please tell them, give them this link. And yeah, and if you have any more questions, any discussions about cost and everything, we are ready to help you. Yeah. Okay.
Margaret says, Karen, you're so pretty and elegant. With that note.
That's a compliment.
Yeah. With that note, have a wonderful day, Karen.
You don't need the breakfast today.
Okay. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Take
Thanks so much,
care.
Karen.
See you next Saturday. See you next Saturday. Same time, same location.